Okay.
Hello.
There we got you.
You got me?
Yeah.
I got you. Okay. I hear you.
Okay. Gentlemen, we are live. Welcome to celebrating Greater Peoria area's rich basketball history. Youngsters these days need to do their homework. Well, here's another lesson. Here are four of the legendary coaches from the Greater Peoria area that are here tonight to tell you their story, tell you about their rivalries, and a lot of things that I didn't know about. And I have a history with all of these guys at some point. So I'm going to introduce them right now. Up to my left is Coach Steve Doty. How you doing, Steve?
I'm doing great, Boo. Good to see you. Good to see the other three gentlemen here.
Awesome. Where are you at right now, Steve?
I'm home in Washington, Illinois.
Great place. Okay. And Coach Westendorf, Chuck Westendorf. How are you, man?
Good. Doing really good. Thank you.
And where are you at this point?
We're out here just at home tonight, just kind of relaxing, waiting for the big show to get on.
Okay.
That's
all
your
right.
show.
We won't hold you up. Wayne Hammerton, how are you, Coach?
Good, Boo. Good to talk to you again.
You as well. Coach Buescher, my coach, how you doing?
I'm good, Boo. In Peoria, Illinois. Getting ready to come to Arizona in a couple months, though. Got to look you up.
Hey, I'm here right now, but I'm heading your way probably next week. So,
good.
Yeah, I can't take this warm weather anymore, you know?
We're not going to get any here.
This 75 degrees is killing me right now.
I like the way you rub it in.
I'm sorry. Well, look here. You know, we have a lot to talk about, so we might as well just jump into it. But first, we got to go back. But we got to go way back. So I'm going to start with Coach Doty. I know you're from, is it Manlius?
Manlius, Illinois. Yes, sir.
Manlius, Illinois. So take us back. Let us all know how you got involved in the game of basketball. Who put the ball in your crib? So take us back to the mean streets of Manlius.
Well, that's real good. I was always interested in sports, Boo, but I think my earliest memories were probably around, 7, 8 years old. The time I got started playing Little League baseball, and then they did have a league for young kids playing basketball at the local high school there. So that's when I first got started playing basketball and baseball both. But then as we moved along into high school, I had a real good high school coach by the name of Bill Jenkins. And I played for him all 4 years in high school. And he had a really big influence on me as far as the game starting out and really getting involved in the game and learning the game a little bit better and having appreciation for, how much time and work you had to put in, plus how much time and work coaches had to put in. So that kind of got me started basketball wise. And then we had a young man that was older, about 5 or 6 years older than myself, named Chuck Hewitt, who went to Bradley. I played basketball at Bradley. I think he graduated from high school at Manlius in 1959. Real small school. We had 120 students in a real small town, 400 people in town. And Chuck went to Bradley and played both basketball and baseball. He played for Chuck Osborne and he played for Leo Schrahl and had a good career in both sports. And he was kind of the guy that I followed and probably got me most interested in Bradley. To be very honest with you. And then a teammate of mine in high school, who was a year older than myself, Greg Berry, who was a very good high school player, he went to Bradley. He was recruited by Coach Stoll, and he came to Bradley and played and had a good career. And I kind of followed. I walked on at Bradley and was fortunate enough to make the freshman team and fortunate enough to play on the varsity and to be a member of the team. And that was a great experience for me. And that's kind of my roots as far as getting involved in the game. And playing for Coach Stoll and watching his dedication to the game and how hard he worked and what a tremendous competitor he was. And then it was at Bradley where I met Westy and Bish, and, they've both been big influences in my life. I'm kind of like the little brother of those. I'm a little bit younger than they are, not much, but a little bit younger. So my friendship with them started at Bradley. And then when I got out of Bradley, I got my first coaching job at Washington High School as Westy's assistant. And Westy had gone there as Bish's assistant when Bish got his first head coaching job in high school. And so from there on, we just progressed through. So that's just kind of a short summary of how I got to be where I was as far as teaching and coaching.
How good was your high school team? I think I read that you guys won a district championship, but I couldn't get any more information.
Well, my junior year was probably our best year. That was when Greg Berry, who I mentioned before, he was an all-state player for us. And we won our first 19 games. And we finished the regular season with only one loss, and that was to Galva, Illinois, who was good too. And then at that time, we played in districts way back then. Or small schools had to win a district to get to a regional. And my junior year, we got upset in the regional championship game by Depew, the Depew Little Giants. And Depew was the home of Ron Zagar. And we remember him or not. He went to Iowa, was a really good player, and played for the old Chicago Zephyrs ABA. He was gone by that time, but Depew had an all-underclass team, and they upset us in the regional championship. Or I'm sorry, in the championship game of the district. And the ironic part about that, I think we finished like 26-2 that year. The next year, we only had 2 starters back, and Depew had the same team back, and we ended up beating Depew, and we won the district that year. So we kind of won it the year we weren't supposed to, and didn't win it the year everyone thought we were going to win it. But my last 2 years in high school, I think we were 26-2 one year and 21-5 the other year. So, but that was quite a while ago when you can think about districts. Westy and Bish don't think about districts.
I played. Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Oh, you were down. Yeah, you're right. You did. Yeah. Westy's the Chicago Bloom guy. He didn't worry about districts.
He's big time.
Well, that's a good segue into Westy, Coach Westendorf. Were you part of the Hungry Hill Boys or whatever they called it?
I sure was. Jerry Colangelo, the Mafia, the Syndicate, crime, gangs, a lot of action. I went to a school called Bloom High School. At that time, Bloom probably had 4,000 kids, a lot of talent. Wow. They were very good in all sports: football, track, basketball, baseball. Colangelo and Jim Boughton pitched on the baseball team. So they had a lot of great basketball players that came through there. And always was really pulling toward the athletic part. I had an opportunity to go to Marian Catholic that opened up the year before, or Bloom. And my mom and dad said, you can go wherever you want to go. And I went to Catholic grade school for 8 years. And at that time, I was one of 2 people that chose to go to Bloom for my graduating class. We had a pretty large class, maybe 50 kids. And they all went to Marian Catholic. But I went to Bloom mainly, I shouldn't probably say this, for the athletics, because I really love sports. And through that, my sister went to Bradley, of all places. I never really heard of Bradley other than I had a friend that went to Illinois, so they have good basketball. And that was way back when Joe Straughter was there and Laverne Tart, Bobby West, and they had a run of great teams when Ozzie was coaching them. And I knew at that time, I went to the Notre Dame game at the stadium. Bradley was playing Notre Dame. And I went there with my parents to see the game. And I just kind of fell in love with the basketball. And so I applied there and sent in my ACT score. To this day, I don't know how they decided to take me, but they took me. And when they did that, I said, I signed a paper and went off to Bradley. And,
Westy, you took it twice and they added them up.
Well, they probably did. I hope they did. So when I got to Bradley, I ran across, I didn't really know a lot of people, but I knew where the gym was. And so I started going to Hewitt Hall, and they had open gym. And I said, wow, I mean, Joe Allen, Tom Campbell, Alex McNutt, they were in there every day. And then I ran across this guy. I thought, this guy's nuts. Who is this coach? It's Coach Stowe. And he's diving on the floor and getting me to stay 3-on-3 and stuff like that. And for some reason, to this day, I don't know how, but for some reason, he kind of liked me. And when the final cut came up, I was part of that team. And I believe at the time, Bish was really good with statistics and things like that. We were ranked the #1 freshman team in the country at that time. Freshmen just played freshman ball. And just to be a part of that team and then kind of grow from there, it was just probably the best move I ever made. I majored in business my first year. And then when I met Coach Stone, I had a PE class. I switched my majors. My mom and dad wanted to kill me because I was in business. And they said, "You're not going to do that, are you?" I said, "Yes, sir, I am." And so that kind of got me through Bradley. And I was fortunate enough to meet Buescher and Steve Doty and a lot of other really nice kids. And those are some of the people that we hung around with.
Wow. Okay. Wayne Hammerton, please take us back, man.
We go
Who put
way
the
back.
ball in your crib?
Okay. We were at the opposite end of Westy School of 4,000. I went to high school a total of 40. And it was East Lynn, Illinois, and they've since consolidated with Hoopston. In fact, my senior year, my dad was going to move to Hoopston because they had a real good team. We were going to move there, and I was going to play with them. But meanwhile, we had a player that transferred in from Karnak. In fact, he was good enough to be offered a scholarship and went to University of Kentucky and played under Adolph Rupp for a while. So he was obviously a good player. And we had a really good team. We had two pretty good players, one great player in him and then myself, and then kind of three fill-ins. But I think we won 27 games that year. We got beat by the school where I was thinking about going, Hoopston, and that time was the regional finals. And I think we had beaten them twice, but we lost by 2 points. And Hoopston went on and lost by Danville in the sectional by 1 point. And then I think they lost to Mount Vernon in the state tournament. So we figured we was a few points away from the state tournament with a school of 40. In fact, we did play Peoria Limestone when they had one of their better teams with Ron Fonstock and another good player who's casing right now. We played them in the Fairway tournament and beat them in the final game. But then I went to University of Illinois, and it was really a culture shock. Went on a baseball scholarship and hoping to play basketball too. And I found out that I wasn't quite as good as I thought I was coming from a small school. And so I ended up transferring to Illinois State and went to play there. Went to Illinois State my last 3 years and played baseball till I hurt my arm my senior year. And then I was off to a small school coaching at Atwood Hammond. And it was why, I don't know, but it went, their one-loss record was average of 4-17 when I ended up going there. We ended up a few games there. And then I got a letter from Ty Franklin, who was the coach of Richwoods, who had coached at Potomac, which is the same conference that I was in when I was playing. And he said they had an opening for a math teacher and sophomore basketball. Well, at that point, I had just I'd been in Atwood for 6 years and could not find a way out. And I had applied for a job at Mance. They had called at noon that they were going to offer me the job. And I got home to eat lunch. My wife says, "You got a letter from Ty Franklin." I read that one. So I held them off for a while. And then I eventually ended up going to Richwoods with Ty. And I spent 6 years as assistant there and then got the head coach job after 6 years.
What was your first year as head coach at Richwoods?
1969-70 year.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Coach. Now, Coach Buescher, my coach, please take us back, man. Let everybody know how you grew up in East Peoria and who put the ball in your crib. Who got you started?
Boo, I grew up in a little town called Danvers. Now, I guess next to Wayne and Steve's, 700. Danvers is between Peoria and Bloomington. It's a town of 700. My class was 22 and the high school was 125. And I stayed there through 16 years old. I moved to East Peoria as a junior in high school. And the reason, my dad worked at CAT, drove back and forth. It was 30 miles every day for a number of years. I got two older sisters. One is 14 years old and the other 9, and they were married, and they convinced my dad. I was a pretty good player at Danvers. Well, I'd be a very good player at East Peoria, you know. And talking about districts, we played in a district final my sophomore year against Tremont, who was really good. Had a kid by the name of Will Watson who ran track at Illinois, and had a big kid named 6'7", and they were really good, and we got beat 5, so we didn't win our district. They went on and got beat. They were beaten by Pekin. They went into that. But anyway, from there I moved to East Peoria my junior year. I think we were like 500, 12 and 13, or 13, not very good. My senior year, we were good. We won. We tied Limestone for the league championship, and Limestone had Ron Wendland, who went to Duke, Larry Hodge, Todd Hatterman, Dwayne Bruniga went to Illinois State, and we beat them at our place. They beat us at their place, and in the regional final, we beat them by 2. And Peoria Central upset us in the sectional. We won our first game of the sectional, and we had beaten them twice by 6 and 27. And Mr. Harry Whitaker, who was the superintendent and earlier the coach, basically held the ball on us. The game ended like 35-35 or 39-39, and they beat us in overtime. And they went on and took 4th to state, and they got beat by Chicago Carver, who was led by Joe Allen at that time. And I probably would have ended up at Illinois State or Illinois Wesleyan had I stayed. But by going there, Coach Stoll come to my house in May or April or May of that year and offered me a scholarship. So I went to Bradley. Westy tells a good story about going there and going up to Old Hewitt Hall, which was upstairs. And the first time I went there, I was on scholarship. And this is the truth. There was Joe Strotter, Laverne Tart, Chet Walker. All the guys come back that have played. They go to summer school there. And here I am on scholarship, and I can't get in the game for about the 5th game. Because you think, well, you're one of a few. Well, trust me, they had 12 or 13 players, and our freshman team was loaded with Joe Allen and Tom Campbell and Alex McNutt, on and on. So anyway, that's where I got. And I'm kind of like what Westy said. I went there to probably be in business. I didn't really have a major as a freshman, but the minute I met Coach Stoll and he started coaching basketball, that changed my life. I mean, it really did. And going back to when I was growing up, my dad, I was I was the last one. I think I was the surprise to him. He was 40, and he always said I kept him young. He led me to basketball and baseball. I grew up loving Bradley. When Coach Stoll came to my house, it was easy. I went to sleep to Squeaky Melchior. I was 6, 7 years old. And I'm listening to radio, going to sleep to Squeaky Melchior, who was, an All-American at Bradley.
Right.
From there, Coach Van Syke, my senior year, I remember I was going back to the locker room before a game, probably in February, and he stopped me. He was the coach at Manual, and he said, "I'd like for you to be, come and be an assistant." And, I got back to him later, and I did that. It's the best move I ever made. You think you leave college, and I was lucky. I got to play at Bradley, and I got to play baseball, played both sports, and great coaching Leo Schraub in baseball. And I played 1 year for Coach Osborne and my freshman year for Coach Stoll, and my last 2. And you think you know a lot. I found out I knew nothing. I went to Manual, and Coach Van Syke taught me he really did. He taught me how to coach high school basketball. And that was the best move I could have made, rather than going out on my own to maybe a smaller school. And I went there for 3 years. And one thing he never kind of forgave me about, though, that's first summer I'm there, he said, "My daughter's coming home from Murray State. Why don't you hook her up?" And I did with Coach Westendorf. And I don't know if he's ever forgiven me. My wife and I introduced his daughter Gwen to Westy, so that's how they got started. And they've been happily married for 50-some years, and we were best men in each other's weddings. And I got the job at Washington when Coach Westendorf had started at Morton Junior High, and he came as my assistant. And then after 1 year, Coach Stoll, I was at Washington 1 year, really didn't want to leave. We had a good young team, and went to Bradley, and then that's Coach Westendorf hired Steve, and those guys did a great job at Washington, and Steve did a great job, followed Westy for a number of years. And then I was at Bradley for 8 years as an assistant, and I went to Peoria Central in 1979, had you shortly after that, and stayed there until the end.
Yeah, it's a great story. I saw that when you got that Washington job, you only stayed there for 1 year, and then that opening is something that you couldn't pass up to be able to coach on that level at your alma mater. But you left a great nucleus for your buddy for Westy.
We took over a program that had won like 6 games in 3 years. They really, Washington Coach Van had been there. I'm sure he had a lot to do with me getting the job. He went to Manual from there. And we were, I forget, we had a good year. And we had a couple sophomores. We had a junior. They were our best players. They were good. And Westy must have had something in his back pocket because there was a freshman that left, 6'7", by the name of Kevin Stevenson. And he left. And I wrote Kevin, he went to California. His mom and dad were separated. And he went to California, and I wrote him a couple letters during the year. Well, I left, and he came back. So he obviously didn't want to play for me. Westy must have done something better than I did. He was a better recruiter than I was. So anyway, they were good, and I didn't really want to leave. And that kid coming back even helped them more. They had good. We had a good team.
Well, I saw that was the Westy and Doty. That was your first year, the 71-72 season. And that was the year in which Manual had a tremendous team under Van Syek with Big Mike Davis, Paul Maris, and somebody that you guys all know, Wayne McLean. And I think that is one of the greatest teams that Peoria area has ever had. Just that was the same year that Thornridge had a pretty good team that I think is considered to be the best of all time, along with maybe Quincy of 1981. But with that being said, you took that team to a regional championship in your first year and then to the sectional title against that Manual team. What is your recollection of that game? And also Wayne McLean, who Westy you spent a lot of time with over the years. And of course, Wayne and Chuck and Steve battled on the coaching ranks.
Well, remembering that game, I don't think I slept for 3 nights prior to that game because I had nightmares at night with Big Mike and Caldwell and McLean on the team. We had a pretty solid team ourselves. And I just wasn't too sure with my wife, is she going to sit on the Washington side or sit on her dad's side? I was fighting that battle at home too. But as it turned out, it was kind of a happening. We played well. They just played a little better, and they were deserving the better team that won that night.
Wow.
If she's smart, she sat on their side.
You sit on the winning side. I don't sit on our side.
They were loaded.
Well, I saw that you guys went back-to-back sectional runner-up the next season, so you guys are rolling at Washington, and I believe 4 or 5 years later, Moline offered you a big bag of money to go over to the Quad Cities. Is that right, Coach Westy?
You know, sometimes bigger and larger isn't all that good. And for me, I took the Moline job. I went there and met Herb Thompson in the late evening, and he turned the lights on in the field house, Wharton Field House. And he said, you know, we get about 4,500 people in here. We have talent. You know, Steve Doty played there several years ago, and Don Nelson. They always had rich basketball tradition. But when I got the job, I just ran in a couple situations where a couple kids went to camps. They got in trouble, and the guys called me up. And so I sat them during the summer. I wouldn't let them, you know, play in our summer league. And it just wasn't a great fit. I missed my friends back home, to tell you the truth. And I could just feel it just didn't seem like a good fit for me. And I'm to this day, I don't look back on it because you never know if you don't try something.
Right.
As it turned out, for me at that time, it just wasn't a good fit. And it was probably most of it, 99% my fault.
Wow. Wow. So after that season, did you immediately come back and go coach under your father-in-law, Ben Syed?
Yeah, he was a little reluctant to hire me or give me a job, but he felt sorry for his daughter. So he said, I better hire him so he can bring home a paycheck. That's the only reason he took me in.
Well, Doty, you take over the reins, and this is your first big coaching job, correct?
Yes.
And I mean, you held that position for well over 20 years. I don't know the exact number. And
I was a head coach 23 years.
23 years.
Right.
And during your stretch, you had some great players. I ran into some of them. Me and Coach Buescher, that 82 team that you had, took us to 2 overtimes in the field house, a classic game. But who are some of the other great players that you had at Washington during your tenure?
Well, Boo, there's just a couple things I'd like to interject before I get into that. I won't take too much time, but I know Westy and Bish both talked about going into Hewitt Hall. The first time I came to the Bradley campus was in the summer before my freshman year. I took 2 summer classes to try to get a little bit of a head start. And like Bish and Westy, I would go to Hewitt Hall and play pickup games in the afternoon and evenings. And the first time that I went there, I got matched up, and the guy I was guarding was a left-handed guard that went to Manual, who you probably know pretty well. It was Al Smith. And I had heard of Al Smith through our newspaper articles from the Journal Star, but I'd never seen him play, and I'd never met him. And obviously that was a rude awakening for me, from coming from a school of 120 kids and playing at the district level. And first thing I got to do when I came to Bradley at Hewitt Hall was to guard Al Smith. But what a great player, what a great person. You know, Al and Westy and Bish, sometimes Al comes back and we'll get together. But that was my first experience. And I also wanted to mention a little bit about Coach Van Syak and what a great influence he had on me. When Westy left to go to Moline, Coach Van and I would run a summer camp in Washington. I believe we ran it for 6 or 8 years, for young kids. And a little bit like Bish mentioned, I learned so much about basketball and coaching high school basketball from Coach Van. And along with Westy and with Bish and Coach Stoll, that's kind of how I formed my philosophy. It was kind of their philosophy too. So that was great. Then one other quick thing, when I got married to my wife, Cindy, my wedding party consisted of 4 Bradley grads and myself, and that was Westy, Bish, Steve Kuberski, and Greg Berry. So we had a pretty good lineup of Bradley guys there for that. But getting back to the question you asked about players, obviously Doug Lee stands out. Doug was a terrific player. He was the same year as Doug Altenberger from Richwoods. And I think one of the things, and Wayne will agree too with this, they could score a lot of points. They did a lot of other things besides that. And if I remember correctly, Doug Lee was leading the league in scoring that year until the very last game. And Doug Altenberger scored 50 or more points
55.
to overtake him 55. And
right.
Doug Lee won the rebounding. So Doug was a 6'4" forward for us. And so they finished 1-2. And so terrific players that had great college careers. But also Doug's brother-in-law, Todd Foster, he ended up breaking Doug Lee's, his brother-in-law's career scoring record for us, and went on and played at Purdue like Doug did. Had a great career and coached at Purdue for a while, and now works at Purdue as an academic advisor. We had a young man named Troy Tyler, who was a very good player for us, about a 6'4" wing, and he went on to Eureka College, is still the leading scorer in Eureka College history, and was an All-American at, I believe that was NAI at that time, and Eureka won a national championship, and he was the most valuable player on that team. So he was a very successful, you always leave somebody out, but Randy Holzhauer was on my first team. He played as a sophomore for Westy and played his junior, senior year for me. He went on, played at ICC for 2 years and went to Central Missouri, which is a different school now. I don't recall what it was, but he had a really good career for us. Matt Newkirk was a terrific high school player for us, went on, played at ICC, and went on to Southern Illinois. He didn't play there, but he was a successful successful businessman in Washington right now. And the other one that really stands out was we had a guard named Danny Witzik, and he played on the 79 team that won the Pekin Holiday Tournament. And that was the first year that Pekin named a most valuable player for their tournament. It was shortly after the tragic death of Marshall Stoner's son, Jeff. It was the Jeff Stoner Memorial Most Valuable Player Award, and Danny won that. And again, a terrific player. We had a lot of good players, but those are ones that stand out in my mind right now. Awesome.
Like I said, I remember that 82 team that you had, and that great game that we had in the field house, the double overtime game.
Yeah, I didn't sleep much. Westy, I didn't sleep after that game. Westy didn't sleep before his game with Manuel. I didn't sleep for a couple of days after that game. That was a terrific game, and Bish probably remembers more than I do, but we kind of struggled because they had a heck of a team. But that was a young team that year too, Bish had. And we were a veteran team. We started 4 seniors and a junior, and we had a team that could really shoot. I believe that our team that year shot like 52% from the field, and that's still a school record. We shot like 76, 77% from the free throw line. That's still a school record. I think we led. We still had the school record for assists in that particular team. And that game that you're talking about in the field house, we trailed most of the way, and to a very good team. And then Doug kind of turned it on the second half. I think he ended up with 35. And he scored right at the end of regulation and tied the game up. And then, they were just better than us in the overtimes. As simple as that. But that was a terrific team we had, and a terrific bunch of kids. And we still keep in contact.
Well, let's see. When you talked about Doug Lee and being behind by 54 points, going into the last game of the season, Doug, he's still pained by this to this day.
Yeah.
I was talking to Coach Hammerton about this. I believe your season in '82 ended on a Friday. Richwoods still had one more game to play, and Doug Lee had a 54-point lead for the scoring title. And I believe Richwoods played Pekin at Richwoods, and Doug went berserk. But what Doug was kind of mad about was that Bob Levitt from the Journal-Star was going down to the assistant coaches of Richwoods and letting them know how many more points that Doug Altenberger needed to surpass Doug Lee. And, history, he did score 55 points and take the scoring title. Do you remember that game, Coach Hammerton? And did you know going into it that Doug needed 55?
Never even entered my mind. He had never. He was a high scorer, but he hadn't scored over 36 points in any game that season. That happened to be against Pekin, and the reason he scored so well against Pekin because they were about the only team that would play us a straight man-to-man, and they played straight man-to-man. It was in the last game of the year, and Doug was just really on, but we kept going to him because he was scoring almost every single time. I looked it up, and he only shot 22 times, but he made 18 out of 22 from the field, and he shot 24 free throws. They fouled him 15 different times or 20 different times, and he shot 24 free throws in that game. And it was a pretty close game. It was the reason that Doug ended up playing most of the game. And I had no idea that he was even close because they said the crowd was chanting, and I guess they come down to assistant coaches, but no one had said anything to me at all. And when we finally had the game in hand, I was going to take Doug out, and one of my assistants said to me, he only needs one more basket to beat Doug Lee's record. I said, he's got one more time down the floor, and that'll be it. He went down the last time and scored, so then we took him out. But it was just a kind of a flukish thing because, most teams would double team and triple team him, but Pekin ended up playing him man-to-man. He had his best games against Pekin, which is obvious because he was pretty tough to stop 101. And it actually turned out to be a bad thing overall because he had scored over 20 points in every game. And I think other than one of the Washington games that we lost to him twice that year that we ended up tying for the conference championship. But then in the regional, he didn't score the 20 either time. We barely got by Spalding, and then we did play that same Peoria High team that you're talking about in the regional finals, and came down to the end. We were down 1 point, but there was actually the buzzer. I guess the buzzer hadn't gone off, but it was all zeros on the clock, and they couldn't decide if the buzzer was going off or not. We were shooting a 1-on-1 free throw, and we're down 1 point, and we shot the free throw, missed it, and Steve Snodgrass, who was our center, just tipped it in, and the referee come running over. They didn't know which way they're going to call. And so he comes over and he asks the scorekeeper, said, "Did you hear the horn?" And he said no. So they assumed the horn had gone off before the time had run out. And so the referee had to make a decision. So he just says, "Basket's no good," and ran off the court. So we were that close to being in that same game that you guys ended up playing in the field with Washington. So that was another one of those times.
Wayne, too, both Doug Altenberger and Doug Leap were terrific outside shooters, and that was before the three-point shot. So they would have added quite a bit to their arsenal, their point totals career-wise, individual-wise, but I don't think the three-point shot came into high school till 87.
Yeah, that makes a big difference. Of course, in the Peking game, we had Doug Altenberg inside most of the time because he's able to score almost at will, only the person guarding him. But you're right, because both of them were excellent. In fact, I think Doug had some at University of Illinois had some of the three-point records for a while. So he was that good of an outside shooter.
Well, Coach Hammerton, you said that you joined Richwoods staff as a 1967?
It was in the fall of '64. I went there, right after Pekin won the state in the year before in '64. And one of the best things that ever happened to me, I think, because Ty Franklin and I were going to, it was a preseason game at Galesburg. Galesburg and Pekin were playing, and it was just a terrific ball game. And Galesburg at that time was a relatively new gym, but they'd only lost 2 or 3 games in their gym ever. And if I remember right, the game even went in overtime. It was back and forth, and just like a heavyweight contest. And Galesburg ended up winning the game by 1 or 2 points. And as Ty and I were walking out, we were in the Pekin crowd, and there was a bunch of the Pekin crowd were just cutting up Doty Hawkins one side and down the other. Now, keep in mind, that's 1 year after he just won a state title. And I thought right then, no matter what happens, I'm just going to do what I have to do because the criticism is going to come. And so you just don't worry about it. And I think that was one of the better things that ever could have happened to me at that time.
Well, I remember you telling me a couple years ago that Richwoods, what turned the program around was one person that came from the South End named Shug Williams, that he flipped that program upside down the day that he stepped on campus. Can you tell us about Shug Williams? Because a lot of people, this is kind of a lesson. A lot of people don't know how great a player he was.
Actually, he was, one of the, I've had some great players. He was one of the best ones. He's the one that got us started. He was just a fantastic player. I remember we played Quincy when Cheryl Hanks was coaching the finals of the Pekin tournament, and we were fortunate enough to beat Pekin to win the tournament. And after the game, Cheryl Hanks, who had, I think that was his last year at Quincy before he went to Quincy College. And after the game, he told me, "I've coached for 20 years. I've never had a player like that." I mean, he was that good. He was one of the better high school players I've ever seen. He wasn't a real physical player, but he could do things under the basket that just, if he could get the ball inside the lane anywhere around, he was going to score. He was just that fantastic. And all the great players I ended up having with Eric Holcomb and Mark Smith, and of course, Doug Altenberger, and later in my career, Mike Robinson. Those were all great players, but Chris was our first really great player, and he's the one that got our whole program started.
Wow. That's awesome.
One other thing, too, he led the conference in scoring as a sophomore, and that was only about his 3rd or 4th year of basketball. He just didn't play. In fact, his freshman year, he was my freshman coach came to me, and he says, "Chris Williams quit." I says, "What?" he says, yeah, he wanted to go. He'd rather play cards than play basketball. I says, I don't know what you're going to do, but you better get him back and get him on the team. So we came that close to losing him. That's a story I haven't told very often. But and then the very next year, he led the conference in scoring. So you can see the ability that he had.
Yeah, I saw that he led the area in scoring 3 years in a row, and in what, 74, 75, and 76, you guys went undefeated in the conference, and he was part of 2 of those teams. Correct.
Yeah, we only lost 1 game in that 3-year period, and so it was at the one time I think it was the longest stretch. We went something like 44 conference games in a row, and then I think some of the great manual teams, when they had their 4-year stretch, I think they may have beaten that. But for a long time, we had the longest streak in the conference.
Well, I tell you, it seemed like you guys had some bad luck. I think it was the 74 year. You guys had a really good team, and I think lost to Central on a Brian Young shot from the top of the key. Then in 75, you come back with Chris, with Shug and Holcomb, and Holcomb blows his knee out in the semifinals at state. And then the 76 team with the Friday Night Massacre in Galesburg, in which, from everybody I've talked to who saw that game, says that you guys got some home cooking with hot sauce on it.
Well, that might have been a little bit of it too, because going into it, I felt that was the only team in the state that could match up with us, because they had 2 players that were called Campbell and Kelly. I think one of them went to Northwestern, one to Iowa. We had Derek Holcomb at 6'10" and Mark Smith at 6'4", and they were 6'9" and 6'7", so they could match up us pretty well. Mm-hmm. And we'd played them a regular season game earlier in the year. We'd beaten them by 10 at Galesburg. I knew they'd be a pretty good team, because there was only one other team that year that came within closer than 10 points to us, and that was Peoria High. And it was a 6-point game in the Pekin tournament, and then a 2-point. We won 2 points in overtime at third place after we had played them at home and beat them by 42. So it was just a crazy turnaround. But Central, the one at Richwoods was a fluke. But it was just turned out that we didn't have the fortune. We just were very unfortunate, and end up, because we weren't even supposed to play at Galesburg. It was supposed to the tournament was supposed to be by rotation was going to be at Canton, but Galesburg pulled some strings. He got the game at Galesburg, and I felt that was the only place that we could have lost to anybody, and that would have been Galesburg at Galesburg, and it just happened. And I try to forget about it, but every so often it keeps coming back up again. So thanks, Boo.
I'm sorry, Coach.
That's all right.
I was just a 5th or 6th grader at the time, and I went to every single game of magnitude in the Mid-State Conference. And that's one of the questions I have for you guys later. How do you feel about the Mid-State Conference and that it doesn't exist anymore? But I'll get to that a little bit later. But Coach Buescher, you go on to Bradley and coaching under Joe Stoll. And my dad, who played at Bradley in the mid to late 50s, was head of security at Bradley. So I was hanging out on campus all the time. Basically grew up in Robinson Memorial Fieldhouse and got to be the ball boy during the stretch of when you were the assistant coach there. You may not remember me, but I had the biggest ass afro in Peoria for a little kid.
I vaguely remember you. I remember your dad well, but I vaguely remember you were there. So, yep.
And I remember some of the great names, and I'd like for you to talk about them. I didn't have to do any research on this. Seymour Reed was my favorite player during that stretch. Number 44, I think he was from Lincoln. He had a part in his afro. I like Dave Klobuchar. I like, of course, Big Mike Davis, Jimmy Carruthers,
Tom Les,
Hank Thomas, because he was from our neighborhood in Chicago.
Yep.
Gene Gathers. Of course, Bobby Humbles. I love Bobby Humbles to this day.
Roger Fegley.
And Roger Fegley. So I saw the 7 overtime game that
was later. That was with Versace.
That was later?
That was in the 80s. Yep.
But I did see the game in which Larry Bird
Got
scored his career low, 4 points.
That was Versace's first year. I was an assistant.
Right. Now, you were known for your defense.
Now, let me tell you what happened.
Did you have something to do with that 4 points?
No. I'll tell you what happened that night. And if you know Versace at all, we were bad. I think we won 10 games. And it was his first year, and we had a bad team. And he wanted to make national publicity. He put 3 guys on Larry Bird. And Larry Bird, being Larry Bird, he didn't care if he scored. Carl Nix had 40-some that night, their point guard. They must have beat us 100-70. But the next day on ESPN, Larry Bird only got 4 at Bradley. And Dick got the Bradley name out there again. And that really was the motive behind it. I mean, it
really?
Well, he wanted to stop Bird. And I think it was just to get some national attention. And Bird's unselfish. He just passed on. He probably took 3 shots all night and got 4. I think Bird had 4 points.
I remember I was so excited to see him play. And he came in early to shoot around, and we watched him shoot, and he was shooting them from everywhere. It was amazing. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is going to be great. They had Mitchell J.J. Anderson, you know.
That wasn't Mitchell. That was not Mitchell yet. That was Mitchell came the next year. The next year.
Are you sure about that?
Well, next year he did.
Dick Versace's first year was JJ's first year.
Versace's first year was 78-79. And Mitchell, he recruited, it was the next year. After 1 year he was there, he recruited, absolutely, because I was on the staff.
You sure about that?
Harold McMahon. Mitchell was on the team. I apologize. Yeah. He was. Okay. You're right. No, you're right. But Bird did not. Here's what I had to do with that game defensively. I drew up the defense for Bird. I think Versace had the defense for Carl Nix. No, Jesus.
That's a good one.
That was the one. But you're right. Mitchell was a freshman on that team, but we weren't any good. Yeah.
I remember he had 4 points. He had a steal, and he got a 2-handed dunk from the right side, and then he miraculously got a tip-in basket because I remember he had Harold McMath and Carl Maniscalco everywhere he went, right?
And Kenny Garrett was on that team too. But yeah, probably Harold McMath and Maniscalco. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So
well, you know the game they're talking about in '82 when we had a young team, Steve, with Doug Lee and Altenberger were great players, and they tied for the conference championship. And us and Manuel, I'm not sure, one of them, we may have tied for third. One of us got third, one of us got fourth. And Manuel went on. We were fortunate enough. We the first round, Woodruff was good that year. Our first round match was Woodruff, and Richwood's first round match was Spalding with Kenny Drummond, and he was he was one of the best players ever out of Peoria. And we beat Richwoods by one, and then we beat Washington in a double overtime, and we got hot late in the year. But I will tell you, I'm sitting on the Fieldhouse stage, and Al Hightower was a freshman coach for us. And he's sitting next to me. It's like 6:30 before the 7:30 sectional final. I'm truth, I'm not making an excuse. I turned down and I says, "We don't have a chance tonight." He says, "What do you mean?" I says, "Our team is dead mentally." I thought we were whipped because we'd been through so much. I just sensed that. And Manuel beat us fair and square, probably beat us 7-8. I never felt like we were coaching that game. I never felt like we were going to win that game. It didn't feel like it. So that happens. It was a young team. The next year we were fortunate enough to go on and get second in the state with the same team. So they were good, but we did come on late, and those teams were good. And I ran into Doug Altenberger in Old Town Scottsdale 2 or 3 years ago. I ran into him on the streets 2 to 3 years ago. May have been before the virus. So I don't know. It was good. We stopped and talked for 5 minutes.
Yeah, I got to see Doug a few times also when had a grandson who was playing golf, and his son was playing in all these golf tournaments, and we'd pair up every so often, and we got to get to see him. But it's been 2 or 3 years since I've been able to talk to Doug.
Yeah, it's good. Those guys were good players. Yep.
Yeah, and they were good people. Both of them were just
yes. But, we had good kids too. We had Tony Weisinger and Ivan Stone, Lamont Hanson, Steve Harvey. We did a good group. Tim Williams.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned. I'm glad you mentioned Tim Williams, Coach. That '83 team. I think in my opinion, was one of your best coaching jobs, in my opinion. Okay. And I'll tell you why. That team had probably the smallest lineup that ever go to the state championship, probably from, I don't know when, but you had 5'6" Steve Harvey, 5'8", 5'9" Tony Weisinger, 5'10" Timmy Williams, 6'3" center.
He was probably 6'2", handsome, yeah.
6'2" center, and then 6'5" Ivan Stone as a forward. And
but
you guys,
Ivan at 6'5", weighed about 125 pounds. Not teasing, but he was skinny.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you guys, I think you beat Manual had beat you twice that year, and you got him in the regional championship in a very dramatic game. And then, of course, I'll just move on to the Elite Eight. You're playing St. Joe's, Westchester St. Joe's, Pingator's team that at one time was ranked #1 in the nation.
They had the kid that went to Indiana, Thomas, I think it was. They won the national title in Indiana in '88.
Thomas, he just passed away recently. I can't believe
I
can't remember his
Reader
name.
and another kid by the name of Reader that went to Marquette. They were 6'9" and 6'8".
Right.
And we really played well.
Yes.
we really played well that game.
Yeah, Ivan Stone gave them the blues, absolute blues. So you knock off the at one time #1 team in the nation, and then you got the game against Marshall, in which Timmy had some heroics. He drew a charge. Tim Williams drew a charge, and to set up that final play into, my opinion, the greatest shot in Peoria area basketball history of magnitude. I mean, a shot to go to the state championship that Timmy Williams shot from the baseline on a great skip pass from Steve Harvey. So can you take us back to that time?
Well, let me tell you what happened that year. We did beat Manual in the regional final. It was at our gym by 1. I think Tim Williams hit the last bucket with like a minute to go. I don't think anybody scored in the last minute of that game, from what I recollect. And he made that shot, and we beat Morton in the first game of the sectional, and he made the winning bucket in that game, and we beat him too. And I really believe in the second half, Morton missed 3 shots. They made everything, and we were able to hold on and win. And then we went to the state, and he made the shot against Marshall. And the story I remember, he took a charge, and I didn't take a timeout. I don't like to take a timeout and call, late in the game. And I thought that their coach did a great job. Tony Weisinger was killing them. And he went to boxing 1 on Tony. And Tony was playing a ton and making every, and the 3-point shot wasn't in it. We might have won easier. But I remember that the ball was kicked to Tim in the corner, and he looked for Tony. I'll never forget it. He's looking to pass, and he had no choice. He had to shoot it, and there was about a 12-footer along the baseline, and he made it. So the story was he beat the 3 M's, Manual, Morton, and Marshall. And then we got beat by Ed Horton and Kevin Gamble in the state championship game. That was tied with a minute to go, and Gamble made an old-fashioned 3-point play, and we just never recovered from that. I think they beat us 4. We didn't come back from that. Yep.
Great team. Of course,
they were fun to coach
the year before. Yeah,
they were fun to coach. They were fun. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going to stay on you, Coach. Fast forward to Manual. I got to go to Coach Doty. I mean, not Coach Doty, but Coach Westendorf. You're over at Manual, and I think right around 84, 85, you guys started to really get some good nucleus of players, and we're looking to challenge for a state title almost every year. I think you had a run maybe 85, 86, 87, 88, I don't know, in which you guys got down to state or went to state 3 years in a row. Is that about right?
We had a lot of talent that came through there. We had a run of talent at our school, but I thought the whole Peoria area, you look at Washington, you looked at Morton, you looked at East Peoria, you looked at Galesburg, you looked at Lincoln, Bloomington with Curry, all the schools at that time, we had recruiters in our gym that that were all over the country. I mean, you talk about Roy Williams, Krzyzewski, you know, Knight, all of them, all the big hitters. And they came not only at our school, but they were going to outside communities, Pekin. They all had players, Richwoods. And I think in that era, I don't know, I haven't seen a lot of games in the last 3 or 4 years, but the talent and the level of talent. And the other side of it also is there were some pretty darn good coaches in this area. And the same schools that had the talent, a lot of times people say, well, they had a lot of talent. They're going to win a lot of games because, yeah, anyone can coach those guys. I don't know if they really understand
somebody's got some background noise.
The structure of a program to have success. The offensive coaches, the defensive coaches, the out of bounds plays, to chart all your turnovers, chart your possessions. I think a lot of the coaches in our area did a great job coaching their team with the talent that they had. And I think the style of ball that we played was a style that was very, very entertaining to the fans out there. They came to watch basketball. And anytime, you know, we played Manual Richwoods, Manual Central, Washington, those were packed homes. The field house is packed with 7,000 people. And I think it's a credit to the players that came through there. And I think it's a credit to the coaches. A lot of time when people say, well, they had a lot of talent. Well, we did. But I think they don't understand the whole structure of the program from top to bottom with Coach Van and our incident. And then when I went to Buescher, it was such an easy move because it was the same structure. Wow. It was the same as mine because I've been trained under Coach Van Syk. And I think that kind of gets lost sometime with people in this area.
Wow. Well, you have 6 championship medals. And I believe a second place at 91 team with the great Howard Nathan. And,
you know, Boo, let me interject something. I'm sorry.
Please.
But Westy brought it up, you know, probably from about 1986, roughly, until 2004. The Peoria area, people talked about Flint, Michigan. We'd have played. I mean, I know that Manual and us, we went out. Manual beat Oak Hill by 10 or 15 one night in St. Louis. And then we played LaMarcus Aldridge down in St. Louis. It's 41-19 at half. We're ahead. I mean, Peoria basketball was dominant. And I believe from 1989 through 2004, there was either 15 or there was like 16-year span. Peoria got first or second in the state tournament 9 times. Now, Manual led the way with 4. We had 2 and 6. Richwoods had a second place finish. We had a second place finish. Manual had a second place. Finished first or second 9 times. That's, wow. You know, all my Chicago friends don't want to hear that. They think basketball was invented. You know, they're a little like, you know, Doty, those Cardinal fans. They think they invented the game. You know, but the game is played in Peoria, and I think we proved it. And I don't know if any of us ever went outside the area and lost. I mean, it just was phenomenal basketball, and the competition was unbelievable. And Westy's right. Derek Grimm and J.R. Koch at Morton and the kids at East Peoria. I mean, Mike Robinson was a great player. A.J. Guyton, the kid I had, he's the 4th leading scorer in the history of Indiana basketball. Now, Indiana's got pretty good basketball tradition. And he couldn't beat Manual. I know that because they were loaded. So it was something.
Yeah, see, Boo, one of the mistakes I made, a major mistake, was that I never got Westy to come back and be an assistant coach for me because everywhere he went, they won state championships, whether it be Manual or Central. But I couldn't afford him. You know, those schools could afford him. I couldn't afford him.
It was expensive.
I've got another story about Westy. I think Westy was involved in this. We played, it was the Manual team that's with the late, great Howard Nathan. And we were playing down at Manual. And we actually had a pretty good team, not as good as Manual. We had Troy Taylor and Frank McIntosh and Greg Floor and Brian Franklin were all juniors on that team. And we got off to a good start. In fact, we had a lead in about halfway through the second quarter. And all of a sudden, Dick Van Stock calls timeout. And I don't know what happened, but I think he talked to his assistants. And I think maybe Westy and McLean may have been involved in this. But anyway, when they go back out, they started yelling at the referees. They just were something unmercifully. And all of a sudden, the game just turned around completely. I mean, it was every single call was going manual way. And then finally, on the opposite sideline, Frank McIntosh was dribbling down the sideline. And a manual player, I think it was Howard Nathan, did a body block and knocked the ball and Frank cleared up about the third row in the bleachers. And the referee, which I think was maybe one of his first or second games as a varsity. And by that time, he was so intimidated, he didn't know what to do. So he didn't want to call a foul on manual, especially if it was Howard Nathan. So he points the other way and says, manual ball. So at that time, I figured I had to do something. I took my coat off. Some people said I threw it on the floor, but I don't know about that. But anyway, I started walking across the floor to meet the referee. And the referee meets me halfway, and he says, "You're right. That was a horseshit call. I'm going to change it." I was at a loss of words. I'd never had a referee say that before. So I turn around and start walking back to the bench. By that time, Howard had gathered up my coat with a big old sheepish grin, comes over and hands me my coat. I go back and sit down, and about that time, the same referee comes over, and he says, "I'm sorry, Coach, but Coach Van says I have to call a T on you because you're out on the floor." And I said, "Well, at least you got that one right." So I don't know if Westy's involved, but I got a feeling he was involved that they got that game turned around. And meanwhile, we lost the game. But the next year, that group went on and got second in the state. And I think Manuel got second that year. But were you involved, Westy, or not?
I really can't remember that far back.
Wayne, it's hard to remember how many times that happened to man. You said you picked out one.
Yeah. I'd say probably yes.
Well, gentlemen, I got some questions for you guys. Is that okay?
Sure.
Fire away.
This one, the first one it's actually from Altenberger. He said, "Who was," and this is for everyone, "who was your hardest working player that you ever coached?"
I suppose he wants me to answer that one.
Tough question, but I would say for me, it's a tough question. Obviously, I hate to pick one out, but I'll pick Chris Reynolds.
Wow.
That's hard. That's a hard. I shouldn't do that because I had a bunch of, like all of them, they had great kids and great players.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Doug had been mine. I mean, he spent more time at it. I can remember when we practiced.
Who was it, Wayne? I'm sorry. Who was it?
Doug Altenberger. Yeah.
Okay.
He would spend more time in the gym than probably any player ever had. I remember the coaches always hanging around, at least an hour and a half after practice. Doug would still be out shooting, and I would be leaving, and his dad would be in the car out there waiting for him. Bill, who also played at University of Illinois previously, when I was there, and he says, "No, when Doug's ready, he'll come in." He had to be sitting out there at least an hour waiting for him, but I think Doug got as much out of his ability as any player I ever had, and it was just his hard work ethic that did it.
Wow. Awesome. Coach Doty?
Well, that's really a tough one when you think back when you coach that many kids. But I'd probably go back to Doug Lee for a lot of reasons. And not only was he an extremely hard worker, but when he came in, the class that he came in with, I had mentioned when they were seniors, we had 4 starters that were seniors. Those kids were all about the same when they came in. And probably they all worked hard, but Doug probably separated himself in two areas. One, he grew. He came in about 5'9", 5'10", and ended up about 6'4", 6'5", but he also improved the most of anybody. And Doug wasn't a super athlete. He wasn't a bad athlete, but he wasn't a super athlete. but he had a tremendous work ethic, and he just got better and better each year. And, sometimes as a coach, you're not sure how good your players are. At least I wasn't, especially as a young coach. And I remember Coach Van Syak, I talked about he and I working camps in the summer. And he was working camps with me. And over the lunch hour, we'd have an hour and a half break. We used to have our open gyms. And there'd be Manual kids over and Central kids over and our kids. And he flat out told me one time that he says, Lee and Altenberg will be the best two players in our league this year. And he ended up being right. And that's the first time I really thought about Doug being an elite player. But he was an elite player because he made himself an elite player.
Awesome. Coach Westy.
Yes, sir. We had a young man, not a great scorer, but he could really guard you. And he made our defense really good. Adrian Hutt. We'd put him on the best point guard, and he flat out would just destroy an offensive player. And he could go left or right on defense. And he was a tough kid and loved to play defense. I'd say he was probably the hardest worker we had for years.
Awesome. Awesome. Adrian Hutt. Shout out to Adrian. Okay. This is from Donald Jackson. And he wanted to know about the destruction of the Mid-State Conference. Why do you guys think that it failed? And how do you feel about it?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. What do you think, Wayne? Westy?
I think it's too bad. It's just because you can't get the rivalries they had in the past. We had such great rivalries that, there would be 4 or 5 teams that were competing for a conference title. And now with hardly any teams in the conference, they've obviously lost something. It's just a shame.
Yeah, the league should probably, in my opinion, and I don't see the games now, but I go to games in December and then I leave. But to me, the league should be Morton, Washington, Metamora, the 3 Peoria schools, Notre Dame, Bartonville, Limestone. Why wouldn't they have an 8 or 9 team league? To me, that's what makes sense, travel, but I don't know why. I don't know. I'm not high enough, not close enough to it on the why. Pekin, they should be enough. I don't know how many teams that is. I could sit here and make up a pretty good league tonight. I would think football and basketball. It wouldn't cost them much money. And as far as travel, now we're going to Danville and Champaign, and I don't get it.
I agree, Coach.
And the basketball is not the same. I don't know about the football, but the basketball is not the same.
Wow. Great question.
Yep.
Okay, this is for all of you. Most memorable game and most memorable game against each other.
Well, I'll start there. Most memorable game against each other. We've already talked about the one against Peoria High in the double overtime game, and I kind of expounded on that. The reasons, it was a great game, and it came right down to the end. As a matter of fact, I believe in the second overtime, we had a kid get fouled. He was a good free throw shooter, Derek Funk, who you mentioned him earlier, had a really good year for us, had a very good career for us, and Derek was about an 80% free throw shooter. He had 2 shots with a second or 2 to go. Bish, I don't know if you remember that or not. And
I really don't.
Yeah, Central was 2 ahead, and he missed the first one. And then, he made the second one, and there's no timeouts left. And they inbound the ball, and that's how the game ended. I felt sorry for Derek, and Derek brings it up to me every time I see him. But, without a Derek Funk, we don't get to that position. But that was the most memorable game that I recall against Bish. And the other one might be a little misleading from the standpoint, we did win a number of regional championships, and we won the Pekin tournament, and those were great. But we had a game against Pekin in the year I don't recall, but it was the night that the gym got named for Coach Hawkins. And we had a really good team that year, and Bish's son Eric was on that team. And we trailed Pekin double digits going the last quarter, came back, and we won the game on a three-pointer at the buzzer. We were down 2, had the ball out of bounds underneath our basket with 1 second going on the clock. And I can remember the fact that Bill Rising and Chuck Stiebel were the 2 officials. Eric Buescher, who we never had take the ball out of bounds, I had him take the ball out of bounds that particular time. And we had Todd Foster and Troy Tyler on the team, who were our 2 best players. Troy was a senior that year, and Todd was take that back. Troy was a junior, Todd was a sophomore, and Troy's brother, John, was a real good shooter. That's the thing that he did best, 12 or 15-footer. And we just ran a little pick play for him, a staggered screen, and he got the shot off at the buzzer. It was in the air when the buzzer went off, and he made a 3. So, he makes it, we win. He misses it, we lose. As simple as that. But it was memorable from the standpoint, it's memorable at that time, but also John passed away a couple of years ago. And so, when I think about him, I think about that particular game and what an impact it had on him. He didn't play much as a junior. He had a really good senior year for us. And, it made me proud for him more than anything. So that's my memorable game.
Coach Hammerton?
My most memorable, you've already brought it up. I tried to forget it, but it's
sorry.
Galesburg game at Galesburg. We lost it. We were rated number 1 most of the year, and we're picked. I think as I said before, I thought that was the only team that could have beat us. That team, I think, would have almost been rated on par with the great Thornbridge teams, because our point spread was about the same thing. We averaged 88 points a game to our opponents 50, and only had 2 games left than 10 points all year long. And of course, we had again a lot of great players. Derek Koch was on that team, and Mark Smith. And ironically, that was year after Chris Williams, who was an All-State the year before, had graduated. But that team was very good, and just again, I think if we get by the regional tournament, I see a reason why we couldn't have won the state. The most memorable game against opponent is probably going to have to be Peoria High, and Chuck probably remembers this game at Central. It was that same year that we got second in the state. We were undefeated in the conference until we played Peoria High at Peoria High, and we had again Troy Taylor and McIntosh on that team. And score was tied with, I think, about 8 seconds to go, and we had the ball out of bounds. And we were going to get the ball into Troy, and who was, to me, was the best one-on player I ever had. He was going to have him take it right to the basket. But obviously, Coach Buescher figured that out. He started to drive, and he double-teamed him, stopped him right there. And so he flipped the ball to McIntosh, and it goes through, and we're all celebrating. And then pretty soon, out of the clear in the far corner, the referee comes waving over and says, "No good, no good." And I says, "What? Did you see the clock?" He says, "No." I said, "Well, I know you didn't hear the horn, but it was just bedlam that time." And I said, "Well, didn't ask somebody. Just ask somebody else." He says, "No." He says, "That's it. Game's over." And so that was it. And then we were fortunate enough to beat Peoria High in a close game in that sectional. And I think Bish almost admitted it, because after the game, he says, "We only got 1 break all year long against Richwoods," and I'm sure that's what he was referring to. So
I doubt that.
Yeah, but that was a game that again, it was a good ball game with two good teams.
You're not supposed to lose at home, like that.
Well, you made sure of that. That's right.
Like out at Richwoods or over at Washington, you're not supposed to lose at home. You don't lose at those places.
Hey, Boo, you said against each other, too, and I forgot to mention, Wayne, when we played Richwoods, it would be the 2 games, Altenberger and Lee's senior year. And the game at our place, the first round we played at our place, and that was a shootout. Both Dougs, I think, had over 30 points, and we won in a close game. And then if Wayne remembers, the second game at Richwoods, both Dougs got in foul trouble. They only played probably a little bit over half the game. They both got in foul trouble right away. And so they were basically, if you can believe this, non-factors in the game. And I think we both had other kids stepped up. And I think we were fortunate enough to win that game. It was a close game both times. Like I said, the first game was shootouts between Doug Lee and Doug Altenberger. And the second game, they really weren't much of a factor because of foul trouble.
Wow.
Yeah, I didn't realize when Boo had the two Dougs on that Doug Altenberger had such a rivalry with Doug Lee. I mean, he wanted to play, and Doug admitted that he didn't play as well. You know, he got in foul trouble in both games, and as Steve mentioned, that they weren't that much of a factor in the second game. The first game, though, was quite a display on both of parts. They showed what great players they really were.
Awesome. Coach Buescher.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny they talk. The sad part is the memory is of the losses. I always remember the losses more than I do the wins. I mean, okay, and I don't remember the play Wayne's talking about. I know what happened. He does. And I get that. He got beat. He remembers the play that beat him. My most memorable games, I mean, obviously winning the state twice is off the charts. When you've coached for as long as I did and did it again. I would say the most memorable game was probably our triple overtime loss. The state championship game in 1989, we were 32-0. Chris Reynolds got hurt seriously late in the year, separated his shoulder in Springfield, the middle of February. Really was never the same again. That's an excuse, but he really wasn't. He played with a wrap. They didn't think he played. The doctor in Springfield told us he'd never play again that year. And he did. He played 17 days later. The trainer come by our school every day, played in the first game of the regional and got playing a little better, but losing in triple overtime is pretty tough. And kid Jackson from East St. Louis made a shot with 0 on the clock. Yeah. I mean, it counted, but he threw it up. There's no way. Probably, I won't get in. They've all talked about a referee here or there, but Chris Reynolds, who's probably the finest young man I've ever coached, got ejected from that game and did not deserve it.
Bill Bangle.
I didn't want to mention the name.
I did. I don't have to work for him, so I mentioned it.
I will tell you that the kid for East St. Louis makes a great play. We're 2 or 4 up, and I really think we're 4 up. No, I think we're 2 up. And we're in 4 corners with 30-some seconds, and Chris explodes down the middle. And the kid from St. Louis comes out of the corner and makes a great block and blocks it out of bounds. And Chris, under his breath, says something. He teased him. He wasn't talking to the referee. And on TV, back then, coaches couldn't stand. And the announcers, when I watched the replay, all thought I got the tee. They did not know. Well, the kid goes down, makes 2 free throws, ties the game. They get the ball. I don't remember if it's at the end of regulation or 1 overtime.
They gave him 4 free throws.
Never.
4 free throws.
Yep. Never. We ended up getting beaten the 3rd overtime. Never. I complained about referees like all these coaches did. I'm not going to tell you I sat there and was quiet. One time in my history, I called the state. I waited about 4 days, and I called Don Robinson, who was the head of the referees, and just said he shouldn't have been on the game. I can't say it. Sometime, Boo, when I'm with you, I'll tell you what he told me and Benny Lewis starting the 4th quarter.
Wow.
I can't say it on TV or on what we're doing now, but he should not have been on the game. And I had the referee, Jones, that was with him 20 years later see me and apologize. He was working the game with him. But that, I don't know that we'd have won anyway. We were 2 up. We should have had the ball under the bucket. That's probably the most disciplined. Then I'm going to mention one other game, and it was a loss. I blame myself. We had Bo Smith, who was a heck of a player, went to Louisville and had a good career. His senior year, Springfield was loaded. They had a kid named Lee that went to Missouri. They were good. I think they won the league, or we did, or tied them. Anyway, we played in the sectional final in Peoria. We had beaten them at their gym, and they had beaten us at our gym. And we're playing them for the 3rd time, and they were good. And we had a good Ryan Bundy, Jamal Little, Bo Smith, and Bo fouls out with a minute to go, and we're 2 ahead. And Ryan Bundy was not a great free throw shooter, but Jamal Little was. So Jamal always took the ball out for us. But I switch. I have Bundy take it out, and we throw it into Jamal, and they fouled him. And he makes 2 free throws. They go down and score. And we're still, we're 2 up. They take it out again. Bundy throws it into Jamal. We score. Well, now there are 3 seconds to go. And we have the ball. We got to go the length of the floor. And I should have had Jamal Little take the ball out of bounds because no longer were free throws important. Whoever had to take the ball out of bounds, the ball fell out of his hand. I swear to God. And falls and lands in bounds, and the kid for them picks it up under their basket. Jamal fakes long and comes back. And he had the ball in one hand, which you shouldn't do. And the ball fell out, and they tied it. Of course, we got beaten overtime. Oh. You remember, to me, I remember, I was very fortunate to win a lot of games, but you remember the losses. I remember the plays and the losses more than the wins.
Wow.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Coach Westendorf.
Yes, sir.
Did your teams ever lose? Do you have any losses to remember? I don't know.
6 rings.
Yeah.
We had a lot of great teams, and we played what we felt was a great schedule. I mean, you talk about Westinghouse, Chicago Carver, Simeon, Oak Hill. They were ranked 1 or 2 in the country. Crane, Joliet, when they were loaded, Chicago King, Farragut, with Garnett and Fields, Roar West, Indianapolis Cathedral, Sean Battier, Country Dye, Georgia, Alabama, Arkansas, Milwaukee St. Vincent was ranked 1 in Milwaukee. We beat them on a last-second shot. Frank hit on the baseline, along with Thornton and Richwoods in the area and Central. But I think the games that stand out to me, when we got to the state tournament, and we had won some states before, and we were a very good team. And our first game, late Friday night, you got to remember that back then you played 3 games, and you could play 3 games in one day. We opened up with Whitney Young, who had 1 loss. We gave him a loss at our place in the middle of the year. We opened up with them first game of the state. We beat them Friday night. We come around, turn around, and now we catch Thornton Saturday afternoon at the Civic Center. We're down 18 points at Thornton and look like we're going to get blown out. We come back from that game and win it, and we played Aurora West for the championship game. We win it. And a few days later, USA Today crowned us the #1 team in the country, which enabled us to travel to Washington, D.C. and take all the kids and family there. That was very, very rewarding in our community. The biggest loss that I've had, and I think about it almost every day, was a call I got about 1:30 in the morning several years ago, almost 25 years ago, from Wayne McLean. And Wayne called me and said, "Hey, Wes, Marshall got shot. Marshall Dunnigan. Marshall Dunnigan was out a little after 1 o'clock, got shot at Harrison Home. And we end up winning the state on Saturday night. On Friday, I was a pallbearer for his funeral. And that's something that sticks with me all the time. None of these games and dates and players, I don't really get into that much, but I remember talking about Marshall at Wayne's visitation, and his dad was there. His dad came up crying. I thought everyone forgot about Marshall. And to this day, I think about that kid a lot, almost every day. To me, that was the biggest loss.
Wow. Marshall Dunnigan, rest in peace. Thanks, Coach. Thank you. This next one is more of a testimonial as opposed to a question. It's from Jameer Jackson, the great Jameer Jackson. And he says he has a tremendous amount of respect for all of you that extends well beyond wins and losses and rivalry and bragging rights. Collectively, you have impacted hundreds of lives in our communities. Thank you for that. That's from Jameer Jackson.
I say thank you to Jameer. Westy knows him well. I just remember he's a player and what he's done, and that's a quality person.
Yeah, I would agree. Great kid.
I think if you got Jameer on the line right now, he would tell you one thing, Curly. We had a game, and Jameer was a good defense player, really smart. He ended up going to Notre Dame, got a degree from Notre Dame, smart kid. So he really had great basketball sense. But one game, he just wasn't guarding anybody. They took a timeout, and he came back to huddle, and I get in, and I said, Jameer, we can't find someone you can guard out there. And to this day, he always shoots me an email or a text, and he said, you remember that, Coach? I said, I sure do. He's a great kid.
Yeah. Been very successful.
Awesome. We only got a couple more questions. I know we've gone past the time, but this is awesome. I'm getting all these text messages and inbox messages. People are enjoying this. This is awesome. So we're going to try to wrap this up, but there's still a couple more questions if it's okay, coaches. Okay?
Good.
I'm just telling you, it's past Westy's bedtime. If he goes to sleep, he goes to sleep on it. It's your fault.
This is for all of you. What was your toughest place to play?
Quincy.
Quincy?
Manual, because they had the best players, but Quincy was a hard place to play. And Rock Island wasn't easy, but Quincy.
Okay. I'd say Quincy too.
Yeah, probably Rock Island for Richwoods, especially when Duncan Reed was there. That I remember one game that it was the year that we ended up year before the second estate with with Taylor and McIntosh, and we had a big lead in the first half. At halftime, I know Duncan went in and talked to the referees. In fact, he had his favorite Homer referee on the game, and they almost never lost. I won't mention the name, but I think probably the coaches here, if they've played at Rock Island, they know who I'm talking about. Anyway, at the start of the second half, we had almost a 20-point lead at halftime. We had nobody with more than 1 or 2 fouls at halftime. By the end of the third quarter, we had 4 guys with 4. And we had about 3 of those not fouling out. We lost the game at the end. And Duncan's oldest boy was a assistant at that time. In fact, he came over and apologized. He says, "Coach, that was just horrible. That shouldn't happen." And then after the game, Duncan come. Of course, Duncan and I had been coaching the Prairie State games, and we had become good friends. And I said, "Well, Duncan, you did it again." And I said, the worst part about it, that's the same referee. I said, he came over to me and asked for a game at Richwoods. And he said, well, you should have hired him. I said, well, if he'd worked for me like he did for you, says I would. Duncan says he would. So,
wow.
So he had a homer and he knew it and he didn't. But that was a very tough place to play when Duncan was there.
Wow.
We were 8 up with 16. I'll tell you a story about Rock Island. We had a great team. I think undefeated when Chris Reynolds was a junior. And we were 8 up with 16 seconds in the ball. And we played overtime.
Was the same referee?
A bad team. 8 ahead with 16 seconds and the ball. How do you do it? We took it out. They called a charge on Chris Reynolds. He took 1 step there. Kid took a dive. It's charge. Kid made 2 free. Took it out. Got 2 free throws. Made it 6. They fouled Chris Reynolds, who was not a good free thrower. The referee went to hand him the ball. He come over to our bench and took a towel, froze him up, missed the free throw. They went down and made a 3. And they did the same thing again. They fouled him again. Referee come over. He just wiped it up. He wiped up the floor again with a towel and handed the ball. He missed it. The kid hit another 3. And I'm not sure we didn't foul it. He had a 3 at the gun to tie the game, 2 threes and a 2. And I'm really not sure they didn't call a foul. We went overtime. It was 5 minutes. It was a 3-minute overtime. They got the tip, or I don't know who got the tip. They scored. I turned to my assistant. I said, "You believe this? We're going to get beat." Somehow we won the game. I can't tell you how. We won by about 8. But we were 8 up with 16 seconds at Rock Island. I also want to tell you something about that game.
Wow.
We walked in the gym. Wayne, he got you. He got us. We played with no clock that night and no scoreboard.
Yep.
They walked in. The AD walked up to us as I got off the bus. Said, "Coach, the lights didn't work. There's nothing working tonight. We were playing. We had a chalkboard at each end, and they had a stopwatch at the top at the bench. It's a true story. They'd erase 8-2. They just erased the score, and then we played the whole. And the night before, Rock Island Allman had played there. So I think Duncan went in at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, pulled all the wires out, and we didn't play the next night with 8 o'clock.
Westy, tell Boo about Jim Wisman's senior night at Quincy when we played.
Yeah, that was quite a game there too. That was amazing.
You remember what happened though?
Was that with the technical?
No, we were out. We played. That was with Gary Church, Dave Heinel, Jim Thine, Dennis Curley. Church was a senior. We had a really good team that year. Cheryl Hanks was coaching, and it was Jim Wisman's final game. And we're just playing out of our minds. About the middle of the third quarter, we're probably up 6 or 8 points. And Jack Savage kicks Jim Wisman out of the game. His senior year, last home game, Jack Savage kicks him out of the game for taking a swing at one of our kids away from the ball. And you would think that'd be a great thing for us, probably the worst thing that ever happened. The place was packed. It was loud. The place goes nuts, absolutely nuts. They run off like 20 points in a row. And it's just crazy. And we go from, being 5 or 6 up to losing by double digits. And it was just amazing. I think that was our first time that might have been the first time we played in Quincy. But just an incredible environment. And still is, but I don't think anything like it was then.
No, they don't have the horses like they used to.
Right.
Okay. AAU. Here's a question. This person didn't want their name to be mentioned, but AAU controls college recruiting and high school recruiting. And how was it dealing with parents? So we'll go first with the AAU question. How do you feel about AAU and how it controls recruiting, where kids are basically not going to the school closest to their house? They're kind of clanning up in AAU and deciding to go to a different program or follow a certain coach.
Well, I'll go ahead and go first. I really wasn't involved. I retired in '96 in Richwoods, so the AAU was just coming into it about that time. And Mike Robinson was involved, my last great player that I had. And to me, it's a shame because the high school coaches are losing control. They're listening to these AAU coaches more so than some of the others. And in fact, I had with Mike, he had him convinced he was a 3-point shooter. And his first 6 games at Richwoods, he ended up shooting something like 16% from the 3. I said, well, Mike, we got to talk about it because he can shoot about 70% inside. So it just makes it that much tougher for the high school coach, I think. And I think it's really a shame.
Well, I'll go next. I was fortunate to get out when I got out because it's gotten way worse. But Boo, I always had a speech, okay? When our season started, after the first practice, it usually was around November 5th or 6th. And I'd put them on the line to end practice. I'd say, okay, gentlemen, or maybe it was the last speech before we started the season. I would say, let me see now. Would I rather ride on a yellow school bus or fly to a game? Would I rather stay in a Motel 6 or a Marriott? Would I rather buy my shoes or get free gear? Would I rather have a coach kick my butt or kiss my butt? Because I said, now the latter's happy because you're going to get your butt kicked. You're riding on a yellow school bus. I know the other's luxury, but these AAU coaches, these kids, the kids kind of had them in my opinion. Sean Livingston's a great kid, Daniel Rupp, and they're great kids. Let's take that. Or Mike Robinson. They can't say anything to them. Mike Robinson, AJ Dent. Well, I'll go play for Boo Johnson. I'll go play for Steve Doty in the summer. They had to cater to him. And it did make it hard. I got out just in time. And I will say this for our kids, and I think Manuel's program, I think we had good programs then. Our kids, we would play in 4 or 5 shootouts in the summer over at Richwoods. go up to Northwestern's team camp. Our kids went with us. I would let them go if they got invited to the Nike camp or a major camp like that, but they did not play with their AAU team. If our high school team played on a weekend, they played with us. So I was lucky then, but that was also almost 20 years ago. That's how I dealt with it. And I can tell you, I was on the other end. I went back to college. They're gonna fib to you, but the college coaches really don't want to deal with the AAU coaches. Trust me. But it's they save so much money. The college coaches fly to Las Vegas and there's 400 kids there, and they can see them all play in a 1 week session, and you drive, or they'll go to the Peach Jam down in Georgia, and there's all the great players are there, and they can see them and save money. But they don't ever think for a minute that they'd rather deal with Wayne Hammerton or Chuck Westendorf or Steve Doty. I'm just telling you. Now, I don't know about today, but that's the way it was when I got out, because I was on the college side too. Yep.
Wow.
The high school coach usually has the best interest. To be honest with you, he's got the best interest in kids. There's AAU coaches that wouldn't want me to say that, and there are some very good AAU coaches out there. Don't get me wrong. But in general, a general statement, they'd rather deal with the high school coach. I'm positive of that.
Wow. Excellent, Coach. Excellent. Anyone else?
I retired from coaching in 2000, and to be very honest with you, I didn't have to deal with it. We just didn't have many kids that were interested, or ones that the AAU were interested in. So, but I would agree with what Wayne and Bishop both said, just from what I know about it.
Westy?
I think I'm good with Wayne and Bish, what they said. I'm talking to some guys, and basically that's kind of it on it. Hit the nail on the head there. They'd rather deal.
I probably shouldn't have said it, but I'm retired now. I'm an old man. So.
Okay, the last question here is, how did you guys deal with the parents? Was that one of the toughest things that you had to endure as coaches, was the parents trying to please everybody, which is impossible?
I'll start.
No, go ahead,
I'll start, Steve. I'll start. Let me say this. When I coached, I had very few parent problems at Peoria Central. I really did. I will tell a good story. I won't mention names. Westy knows this. He was with us. We won the state in 03. And that Monday, I was in the principal's office with a parent, wondering why their kid didn't play more.
Oh.
And we won the state championship, and we're 31-1 or 32-1. So you got to let that go in one. And they were good people. They were, truthfully, the parents were good people. But, it just, and it's okay. But I really did. At Peoria Central, I would say this. I won't say it. I'd say I just didn't have many parent problems in the city. You're going to have more at Washington and Morton and Quincy, in my opinion.
Wow.
But I don't know, Wayne. I don't know if you had parent problems. I really had very few, and I really did. I would never complain about that. But again, I've been gone since 04.
No, I think
it's getting hard.
In the schools like the Peoria schools, it's not really the total community feeling that you have inside. I started out coaching a small school, Atwood Hammond, and there, I mean, you're on the hot seat all the time. And in places like Quincy, which is a one-school town, those are the ones where you really get the pressure. For the most part at Richwoods, and like Chuck, that parents were great.
There's 4 schools in the city. They can't all win.
Yeah.
I mean, are you going to complain and, fire Wayne Hammerton because he doesn't do this, or fire Dick Van Syke or Chuck Buescher because we can't all win? I mean, we're playing each other. And the parents were not a problem for us at that time. But go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, I think in our situation,
I
think in our situation, I'm not saying we never had a parental problem, but I think that we had very few. And I think one of the reasons we had really good administrators and really good athletic directors. And if you're in that situation, especially in the suburban schools, if you got the support of your AD and you got the support of your superintendent, they deflect a lot of those problems. And we had Ray Torrey and Lee Edwards as superintendents, and they both had athletic backgrounds. And I had Jack Stromberger and John Venturi as ADs, and they both had athletic backgrounds. And most of that stuff, we didn't hear much about, or if we did, it was, they had taken care of it for us. And, it's interesting because I was athletic director my last 14 years at Washington, and John Venturi and I split it. I had the fall sports, and John had the winter sports, and we split the spring sports. But one of the crazy things, whenever we had a meeting with a parent coming in to complain about a coach, it would be so, in a way, I think it's common, but we'd have a parent say, well, this coach isn't playing my son or my daughter because that coach doesn't like my son or my daughter. And our rebuke to that was always, I don't believe that, because coaches love to win. Coaches aren't going to not play your son or daughter because they don't like him. If they can play, they're going to play, because coaches like to win too. And then they usually didn't have an answer for that. And, we had the most of the time, it was as simple as that. Coach doesn't like my son or my daughter. And that was the basic thing. And that was always our answer to them. And most of the time, they didn't have an answer for that. So I think if you have support from your administration, regardless of where the school is, you're going to be in pretty good shape. And if you don't, well, it's going to be a different story. But I was lucky in that regard. I had really good administrators.
Awesome.
Hey, Boo, while you answer that, before you get to Westy, there's one thing I did want to mention. I was really lucky. I coached for 23 years on the varsity level and 6 years as a Westy sophomore coach. But two guys that I really do want to mention is I was fortunate to be able to coach my own son, Bo, who's coaching now at Streeter. And it's a pleasure to get to watch him and how he's grown as a person, as a coach throughout the years. And he's guys like Bish and Westy have had a great influence on him too, because he's been around them all his life growing up. But the other one I wanted to mention was, you ask about the toughest player and our best players. For me, the smartest player I ever coached was probably Eric Buescher. And Eric played for me as a junior and senior as a point guard. And Eric was one of those guys that, he was, as they say, quote unquote, a coach on the floor. But he was such a pleasure to coach from the standpoint of he knew his role. Eric was never a great shooter, but he could handle the ball. He could guard. He was smart, made very few mistakes. And I can also remember that between his junior and senior year, he didn't shoot a lot of free throws, but he didn't have a very good percentage. And one of the things I told him, I said, Eric, we need you on the floor late in the game. If you're going to be on the floor, you got to be a better free throw shooter. And I remember Bish's wife, Barb, telling me that summer she used to go out in the backyard and rebound free throws for him. And he turned himself into a very good free throw shooter who played almost every minute of every game, and certainly played the last 4 or 5 minutes of every game when it was a tight game. And the other thing was, he was a guy that, like I said, he wasn't a real good offensive player from a standpoint of shooting the basketball, but he was a kid that could make a shot when you needed a shot made. And in other words, if they were taking away our 1 or 2 threats, if they were taking away one of the Tyler boys or taking away Todd Foster, and they didn't guard him, he'd make a shot. I remember one night at Canton, he made a 3-pointer against a really good Canton team that put the game into overtime, and we won. And I remember the Canton coach, Craig Campworth, couldn't believe after the game it was Eric that made the shot. But, smart players, you can always use smart players. And he was probably the smartest kid I ever coached.
That's awesome.
Hey, Boo, let me interject real quick.
Please.
Because Westy talked about the Manual Washington game and his wife and how hard that was going to be for her, when they play, who's she going to root for? Well, when Eric was a senior, we got within 1 game of playing Washington. We beat, I'm not sure who we beat in the first round of the sectional, but I think we may have beaten Richwoods. But Washington played Lincoln to play us, and that's the year we won this. That's the year we took second. I don't know who we beat, I forget. But anyway, Lincoln played Washington, and Lincoln beat Washington. Otherwise, wow. Washington would have played us.
Same situation.
Yeah,
wow.
But I'm going to say this. There was no doubt who she was rooting for. All I can tell you is I was playing second fiddle that night. Okay? But I want to say this, and I appreciate what Steve said about Eric, because Eric was that kind of player. But I probably would have felt sorry for my son that night, because Chris Reynolds was our point guard. And seriously, Chris Reynolds can eliminate you. So it's maybe a good thing.
Well, Coach Doty, that's a good segue into a testimonial, or not actually a testimonial, a message that I've been instructed to deliver to you by somebody named Bo Doty. And he said, you better report to duty a week from today at 3:10, not 3:30, not 3 o'clock, 3:10 p.m. for Streeter tryouts. And then lastly, he said he couldn't ask for a better dad.
I think he needs a manager this year. I think his manager graduated last year.
Well, fellas.
What's Cindy doing? Don't tell her I said that.
Well, thanks, Boo.
Gentlemen, it's been great. I know we were supposed to do an hour and 15. I don't know how long it's been, but this has been awesome. It's a pleasure to see all of you virtually, but this has been great. I hope you enjoyed yourselves, and the response on my Facebook page has been a lot of people sending messages. So you guys are popular and you're most deserving. And thank you for coming on with me. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Boo. I appreciate you.
Your dog told you it was time to get off, didn't he? I got you. Thanks,
yeah,
Boo.
He's
good to see you, Wayne.
Yeah, Wayne, good to see you. Yeah,
good to see you. Right. It's been great. Right. Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Right. Good night.
All right. Okay, gang, that's a wrap. 4 legendary.
Boo, I'm going to look you up when I come to Arizona.
Come on, please. Come on, man.
Are you in Greyhawk?
Very close. 10 minutes away.
Where are you?
I can't tell nobody. Somebody might come get
Okay. They're listening. I'm sorry. I got
you got my number.
I got your phone
we
number.
will definitely hook up when you come out here, Coach.
I'll look forward to it.
Okay.
All right. See you.
Westy, I'll see you soon.
I will.
Pam, I'll see you guys real soon, okay?
All right.
All right. Okay, gang, that's a wrap. 4 legendary coaches. Westy Doty, Steve Doty, Coach Chuck Westendorf, Wayne Hammerton, and Chuck Buescher. This was awesome. I enjoyed it. We could have gone all night, and the stories are tremendous about the great players and great teams, and just a great celebration of Greater Peoria area basketball. So I came out of retirement to do this. I might do maybe a couple more. If you have any suggestions, let me know. But this was fun. You guys take care of yourselves. Basketball season is here. Enjoy it and support those kids. Take care, y'all.
He was a smart player. He should have played.